I want to see the whites of your eyes. I can't see them in the dark. I want to connect with you. Beg pardon?
What about the reds?
The reds, the red of your eyes? Gosh, I hope nobody has the red of their eyes. Recently, I was watching a interview on TV, and it was a famous movie star that was being interviewed. And the interviewer looked at them and said, "You came from basically nothing, and now you make millions of dollars per each movie that you star in. How does it feel to make that kind of money, to make millions of dollars?" And his response was, "Well, you know, $1 million doesn't go as far as it once did." Truly, he was not living or feeling that he was prosperous. He did not feel the abundance that lived within his life. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, stated, "Lessons on prosperity and mental control of conditions are sometimes dangerous because of the misunderstanding of this subject. Science of mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Neither does it promise something for nothing. It does, however, promise that one who will comply with its teachings, that he shall be able to bring greater possibilities and happier conditions into his life." Shakti Gawain said, "Prosperity is the experience of having plenty of what we truly need and want in life, material and otherwise." And I think one of the key points that's made here is prosperity is an internal experience, not an external experience. Let me repeat that. Prosperity is an internal experience, not an external state. While prosperity is in some ways related to money, it is not caused by money. And as always, I went to the dictionary because I want to look up the word that I'm talking about, and it was defined as good fortune, wealth, and success. And the word itself, prosperity, began in about the year 1200. It was brought to us from the French prosperet, which meant success, well-being, and good fortune. And so now that we have a common ground of what we're talking about in terms of prosperity, I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts about prosperity. There can be no such thing as lack unless God contradicts himself and nullifies all of the work that Spirit has done. So if you feel that you're living in lack, it is by the power of your own consciousness that that has transpired. Now, we've all heard the old saying, or the saying, change your thinking, change your life, or change your thinking, change your mind. And I often think that that's kind of a trite saying that we use over and over again when we first enter science of mind. But really, when you stop and think of it, it is true. One of the most powerful ways to do this is by creating an environment of support and love around you. This includes people who are positive, empowering, and cheerful. And if you don't have those kind of people in your life, if they are not supporting with love and your intentions, then it's time to release and let them go. You have the right to not accept anything less than support and love in your life. We attract people into our life that we want to support that. And if you're attracting anything less, then it's time to shift or change your consciousness. We need also to live in the present moment. Because when we live in that present moment, what we're doing is training our consciousness for what it is we choose to bring into our life. The next step for prosperity in our life is to stop living in doubt and to begin to allow God's energy to flow through us. Allowing doubt is simply negative vibrations, negative energy to enter into our life. If you doubt that you can have something, then trust me, you won't have it. Take, for example, if we all were to open our textbooks right now, the Science of Mind textbooks, and look in the back of the textbook, we'd see the creative process charts. And most of you know there's 3 different sections in them that's called spirit, soul, and body, or some of us call it seed, soil, and plant. And if you desire something, we create it in mind, we plan it, and it comes into fruition or manifestation. But if you doubt at all that you can plant it in fertile soil, then it will not be done. Our manifestation will never ever come to fruition in our life. Manifestations are created or are in direct proportion to the doubts that we create within our life. And the speed of our manifestation of prosperity is in direct proportion to how fast we can remove those doubts in our life. What we allow within our life will transpire. Not too long ago, Michael and I attended the annual leadership conference in Orlando. And they kept advertising the whole week that we were there that the final session or the final general session, they were going to be giving prizes away. And the huge prize was an iPad. They had several minor things like books and gift certificates. And as we entered the main ballroom, they took our name tags from it, so we put it in a box, and they stirred them all up towards the end of the session. And one of the things that a friend of mine, who used to go to the center when Carolyn had it over on the lake, his name is Kevin, and he now lives in Idaho. And when Kevin walked into the ballroom, he kept saying, "I'm here to get my iPad. I'm here to get my iPad." And we all kind of chuckle and we'd say, "Yeah, Kevin, I'm here to get my iPad too." You know, what makes you think you're so special? I'm here to get my iPad. So we all threw our names in the name tag, and they stood up there up front, and they'd draw something, and they'd give a book out, and they'd draw another thing, and it was a blinking sign about Las Vegas for next year's conference. They had about 15 or 20 prizes to give away, and they kept calling names out. And then they said, "Okay, anybody that's won a prize, bring your name tag back up, throw it back in the box, because everybody gets to qualify for the iPad." Well, Kevin had already won one prize. He already won one prize. And all of a sudden, they stirred the name tags up, pulled out a name tag. Guess who it was?
Kevin.
It was Kevin. He was there to claim his iPad. There was absolutely no doubt in his mind that that iPad had his name on it. He had no fear, no doubt. He manifested it within his life. Along with not living in doubt, we must also live in the divine flow. Now, what does that mean? Remember that one source and one source only supplies all good and prosperity in our life. We must be willing to listen to the intuition and that small voice or big voice that comes through. We must be willing to hear, to listen to the voice. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross tells us, "How do the geese know when to fly to the sun? Who tells them the seasons? Who tells them the season? How do we humans know when it is time to move on? As with the migrating birds, so surely with us there is a voice within, if only we would listen to it, that tells us so certainly when to go forth." Now, granted, she is talking about, if you know anything about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she was a expert or quite an author about grief. And even though she's talking about transitions and grief there, it still is certainly applicable to all of us. We are just like the geese or the ducks. We have that innate sense within us if we'll only listen. In 1986, the World's Fair was in Vancouver, and I happened to live in Southern California and owned a VW Westphalia. And so my partner and I went north and camped along the way. It was going to be a great 2 weeks vacation, and we got up to Vancouver, and we were staying in a bed and breakfast, and we bought a 3-day pass to get in to the fair. And the third day came, and I had this innate sense or this innate feeling in me that we just should not go into the fair that day. And when we were rummaging through our stuff within the VW after we had parked it, I couldn't find our tickets. And so we had to go back to the bread and breakfast, find our tickets, come back. And the whole way back in, I kept saying, "Are you sure we should go to the fair today? Maybe we should go visit Vancouver and tour Vancouver, and we could just rearrange our vacation," because we were on a timeline. If you know anything about me, it's like here on this day, here on this day, here on this day. And I said, maybe we should just kind of relax and just do something different in Vancouver. No. We got to get the ferry. We got to do this. We got to do that. So we parked the car, and the fair closed at 12 o'clock that night. So when we came out, I noticed that as I was walking up to the vehicle, that there was a bunch of glass at my front tire. And I thought, that's strange. That glass wasn't there when I parked the car this morning. And all of a sudden, when I got close enough to it, I realized they had busted my wind wing, gone into the car, and stolen about $2,000 worth of our belongings. We had no sleeping bags. Part of our clothing was gone. Our purses with our checkbooks were gone. Money was gone. Our little TV, the list goes on. And so from Canada, we were having to, cancel credit cards, cancel checking accounts, take care of all of that. And yet if I had listened to the voice within and had insisted that we not go into the fair that day, potentially we might not have had that experience. I failed to take action on what I was hearing from within. Everything that happens in our life is the feedback of the supportive universe, even when we think it is a challenge rather than something good in our life. Remember, there is no separation between you and the people and the events that transpire in your life that may present obstacles or challenges for us to overcome. We are all one with the divine and one with each other. It is the desire of God that we should be rich. Let me repeat that. It is the desire of God that we should be rich. We forget this when we forget that God is our source. One of the things that I write on the note or the memo of all my checks is, God is my source. It's just a little reminder to myself that I am able to pay those bills because Spirit is my source. And Spirit wants each and every one of us to be rich because she can express herself better through each of us if we have plenty of the things to use in giving divine expression to our life. When we have unlimited commands of the means within our life, we open ourselves to a greater expression of life. And why? Because we let go of that nagging feeling of fear. And we let go of that need to cling or hang on to physical possessions or things. We have unlimited resources that are available to each and every one of us. And when we realize that our subconscious mind, according to Thomas Troward, is our connection, our access to unlimited resources, a whole new world opens up to us. We can choose to be positive in our conscious mind and plant those seeds then within our subconscious mind, programming it to receive and to experience unlimited storehouse of the divine and infinite energy. Sometimes we may think we're listening to the messages within, and then again we may not be. My spiritual coach, who happens to be Catherine Dollahide, always says, "Is this a good idea, Eileen, or is this a God idea?" And I always kind of chuckle whenever she reminds me of that, because we need to let life lead us. When we do this, we know that it is a God idea. Back in the 1980s, there was a professional player, and I hope I don't stumble through his name too badly, a professional basketball player named Dikembe Mutombo. Anybody know that name?
Yes.
He was from the Congo. Now, as a child growing up, he lived in a village and in an area where his friends and his family and his relatives were dying off based upon diseases that had already been conquered and taken care of in other parts of the world. Or he watched friends and families die of HIV or AIDS. And so what he decided to do was that he was going to become a doctor. His wish was to come to America and be trained as a doctor so that he could go back to his home country in the Congo and eradicate diseases so that people would not have to live with them any longer. And since he was a good high school student, he applied through a special international scholarship program and was accepted into Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Now, he had never, ever in his life played basketball. Now, remember, this is an 18-year-old guy. However, he happened to stand 7'2". And so the coach, John Thompson, from Georgetown, had an eye for tallness. And so he went to him and asked him if he was willing to learn how to play basketball. And he said, "Sure, I'm an athlete. I'd love to try." And of course, what he became was a legendary shot blocker and defender. And all 4 years that he was at Georgetown, Georgetown was in the top 10 of college for the NCAA. And so after college, he went ahead and he was the 4th draft pick for the NBA when he had graduated in 1991. Now, he went on to play professional basketball, and he became the greatest defensive center in the sport at that time. Now, what would have happened if he had not gone with the divine flow of his life? Because ultimately, because of the money that he made and the figure that he was, he became the spokesperson for CARE. He traveled the world, helping not only his own country, but other countries through CARE. And the money that he made, he put back into philanthropic things to assist third world countries. Mutombo discovered that he could do more good as a basketball player than he would have ever done as a doctor. He lived in the divine flow by listening to the messages that can come from within. He was led by spirit, not what he thought was a good idea, but it was a God idea from within. To live in prosperity, we have to be willing to change. We have to be willing to let go of some of our concepts and our ideas. I'm sure that all of you have heard the story of the guru, who the young student came to him and wanted to learn from this guru, and so he sat before the guru, and the guru ordered tea. And as he was beginning, the guru began to pour. He just kept pouring and pouring, and the tea overflowed the cup and began to flow onto the table. And the student finally said, "Stop, stop, stop, it's overflowing." And the guru looked at him and said, "Yes, it's overflowing like your mind. Your mind is so full of your beliefs that it has no room for the newness, for new concepts and new ideas." And so this is how we can change if we're willing to empty our cup, if we're willing to let go of our error beliefs and resistance to learn something new. we can do that and fill it up with new concepts and new ideas of prosperity. In the book, The Science of Getting Rich, which was written by Wallace Wattles in the late 1880s, he stated, first, you believe that there is one intelligent substance from which all things proceed. Second, you believe that this substance gives you everything you desire. And thirdly, you relate yourself to it through a feeling of deep and profound gratitude. The greater our gratitude, the more good we receive. The mental attitude of gratitude brings us closer and closer and closer to the source from which all blessings flow. Gratitude keeps us looking towards spirit and also further keeps us in the moment, thinking about now, not what we don't have and what was in the past. Gratitude expressed in our mind reaches out when we express that to spirit. And by expressing gratitude, we open ourselves to continue to receive. It also, when we express gratitude, keeps us from looking at those things which we are dissatisfied with in our life. And it keeps us centered right here, right now. A grateful mind is constantly focused on what is right with our world, not what is wrong. A grateful mind expects what is good and positive. And when we expect good and positive, our faith deepens. Our faith continues to increase. In the 13th and 14th century, a golden Buddha was created. It's over 12 feet tall and 2.5 tons, and by today's standard in gold, it's worth about $250 million. It was believed that around the 1700s, Burma was invading Thailand on a regular basis, trying to absorb Thailand. And so this beautiful and gorgeous Buddha that was in Thailand at the time, the monks who happened to have it in their temple made the choice and the decision that they didn't want the Burmese to capture the golden Buddha. And so they covered it with about 12 inches of like a mud plaster. And so instead of a gorgeous golden Buddha, it became this plaster type figure of Buddha. Ultimately, it was moved in 1935 to Bangkok. And then in 1955, it needed to be moved again because the temple where it was located was going to be taken over by a road, by a new freeway with the change that comes with progress. And so they brought in a crane to move it to its new location, to its new temple. And when the crane picked it up, all of a sudden a crack began in the 12 inches of plaster or mud plaster. And so they immediately put it back down and let it, and realized that they were going to need a bigger crane to move it when there wasn't enough time to do it that day. And so what they did is the monks covered it over with tarps and tied them down because it was going to rain. They didn't want anything to happen to it. And they decided that they'd leave it all night until the next day when a bigger crane got there. During the middle of the night, the head monk went out to check on it, just to make sure that it was okay, that the rain wasn't destroying it, that it was still covered up. And he went with a flashlight, and he'd lift up the sides of the tarp, and he'd look inside to see that if it was okay. And at some point, his flashlight happened to shine on the crack, and it bounced back at him with a light, with a shining light, with a glimmer. And so he ran back and he found a chisel and a hammer and he began to break through the plaster. And lo and behold, what was beneath that plaster, what had been hidden for over 300 years, was this magnificent golden Buddha. not a plaster Buddha. And so he went back and he got the other monks, and they came back and they too began to break away and deal with the plaster. And it was magnificent. It's on display now within there. But what the story reminds me of is I'd just like you to ask yourself right now, what is hidden deep within each one of you that is golden? What is golden within you that you haven't recognized or you haven't expressed gratitude for? What prevents you from finding the riches that live deep within you? Prosperity, after all, is our divine right, and God is our source. Please say with me, prosperity is my divine right.
Prosperity is my divine right.
God is my source.
God is my source.
This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is. Will the ushers please come forward?